A revolutionary leader, a symbol of Arab unity, and a man who reshaped Egypt forever. Gamal Abdel Nasser was more than just a president, he was a legend. From leading the 1952 revolution to defying global superpowers, his impact still echoes today. But who was Nasser? Join us as we uncover this iconic leader's rise, rule, and legacy. Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser came clean about organizing political killings before his revolution in 1952. He intended to strike King Farouk of Egypt, courtiers, and other challenges to the country's destiny. With few guns fired and no deaths, the Egyptian putsch of July 23, 1952 was a laid-back event. Fellow militants wrongly arrested Nasser, and the new military leader said the army had cleaned itself of corruption and betrayal. The king publicly abdicated, and Nasser sent Farouk into exile, sparing him. His life and achievements are evidence of the ability of young people to inspire the Egyptian freedom movement once again. Newer militant groups like Communism, Young Egypt, and the Muslim Brotherhood first emerged in the 1930s. Nasser quit Young Egypt in 1938 due to their lack of development, having joined in 1936. Egypt suffered military and financial losses during World War II in 1939. In 1942, Nazi field commander Erwin the Desert Fox Rommel threatened an assault on the Nile Delta and the Suez Canal. Axis allies chosen by King Farouk for his second ministry resulted in the Axis foothold in May 1943. There has been much discussion, uncertainty, distortion, and myth-making over Nasser's participation in the Muslim Brotherhood in the 1940s and early 50s. The Egyptian resistance to British control was varied, with some members leaning socialist left, and others Muslim Brotherhood. Ruling Egypt after July 23, 1952, the 14-man junta destroyed opposition sources and built a cult of adoration around Nasser. Declaring a 3-year transition period of military control, they ordered the arrest of 64 prominent politicians. Rising communist arrests in 1953 followed from their denunciation of the junta as a regressive, fascistic, imperialist military government. Egypt became a republic in June 1953, and Naguib was appointed as the first president. Under its consolidated direction, Nasser merged military and civilian intelligence agencies as deputy prime minister and interior minister. Turning on the Muslim Brotherhood in 1954, the junta pardoned the brother who had killed Prime Minister Nukrishi in 1948 and backed the Brotherhood's candidates for the Cairo University student elections. The junta outlawed the Brotherhood and detained more than 400 of its leaders and adherents in January 1954. Underlying the scenes, tensions developed that resulted in the Liberation Rally and personality conflicts between Nasser and Hassan al-Hudaybi, the new head of the Brotherhood. For Egypt and the Arab world, the fall of the March Revolution brought about drastically broad changes that turned the military autocracy into the personal dictatorship of an all-powerful Nasser. Published as a proposed new constitution in 1956, it promised democracy and let the president dismiss the parliament. The Algerian independence movement came to an end in 1956 with the Suez War, and a three-way invasion by France, Britain, and Israel started. Egypt's best-living author, Sanala Ibrahim, is renowned for his existentialist, experimental, brutal approach. Additionally, a lifetime political activist, he battled against Western imperialism and capitalism. His participation in the Communist Democratic Movement for National Liberation resulted in his detention during the March 1954 rebellion, and again in 1956, for handing pamphlets endorsing the government during the Suez War. During a crackdown in 1959, the government imprisoned Ibrahim and hundreds of his allies in concentration centers like the Abu Zabal camp. Shudi Atiyah al-Shafi'i and Ibrahim were shackled together and tormented, with prisoners compelled to break blocks into smaller pieces, using hand tools and transfer them to a machine for pulverizing. The Abu Zabal camp was infamous for its cruelty and torture. Nasser approached the USSR more closely in 1964. Khrushchev was visiting Egypt in May of that year. Nasser released the communists from prison as a kind deed. Ibrahim was released on May 10. Following the murder by an insurgent soldier of King Faisal II, Crown Prince Abd al-Ilah, Queen Nafisa, Princess Abadiya and their entourage, the Iraqi royal palace caught fire on July 14, 1958. Additionally slain was Prime Minister Nouri al-Said. His body was mutilated and burned on fire. Declared the flag of freedom in Baghdad, Gamal Abdel Nasser would soon be flown in Amman, Beirut, and all over the Arab world. Signed in February 1955 between Iraq and Turkey, the Baghdad Pact was a mutually cooperative agreement meant to strengthen bilateral ties between the two nations. Cairo, however, greeted it with great hostility. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Said accused the agreement of treason, therefore inspiring the Iraqi people to rebel against him. Under a fresh special agreement struck with the Iraqi government, Britain added powers to retain military troops and aircraft in Iraq. Iran and Pakistan signed the agreement by the end of the year, so establishing an intact connection between NATO, via Turkey, and its Asian equivalent, SEATO, thus preventing Soviet expansion from the north, and so affirming Britain's supremacy in the Middle East. Nasser's perilous situation in Egypt affected his great hostility for the Anglo-Egyptian agreement with Britain. The January 1955 meeting highlighted Nasser's limited regional influence, therefore posing issues of reputation. For Nouri, who became Chief of Staff, Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and Defense Minister, the war in Iraq evolved into a political career. Gamal Abdel Nasser demanded unification with the United Arab Republic, believing Iraq was developing during the revolution there. Hero of the 1958 coup, Colonel Abd al-Salam Aref signed a mutual aid pact between Iraq and the UAR, and started to be a strong supporter of Nasser. Apart from establishing diplomatic ties with the Soviet Union and China, the new government eliminated the monarchy, parliament, military forces, police, court, and civil service. Iraq was en route to join the UAR or become its strongest friend, but Brigadier Abd al-Karim Qasim outranked Aref and acted preemptively against him. Concerned about the UAR project's legitimacy and the regime's integrity, Nasser started clandestine operations against Qasim. The Shawwaf insurrection in Mosul in 1959 resulted from Iraq's communists' increasing confidence and power, enabling them to more actively challenge the UAR. In 1959, Farajallah al-Helu, a Lebanese communist commander, was murdered by his brother Nasser in Damascus. Syria is the sole nation, apart from Egypt, that has been governed directly by Nasser. The historical narrative of the nation is characterized by a prominent public divorce and the presence of an oppressive dictatorship. In 1954, the military executed a coup d'état against Colonel Adib al-Shishakli, who had governed with an authoritarian approach since 1949. In September 1954, Syrians conducted the inaugural free elections in the Arab world, signifying the first instance of a civilian-led parliamentary democracy in the region. Two formidable forces obstructed the advancement of democracy, the military establishment and Gamal Abdel Nasser. The ascent of Nasser amidst the events surrounding the Baghdad Pact, coupled with the downfall of the Khouri administration in Syria, resulted in heightened intervention by Syrian military officers. The military alliance with Egypt was orchestrated by Shawkat Shukayr and Adnan al-Malki. The assassination of Malki in 1955 precipitated a stringent repression of the Syrian nationalist movement. In 1958, the Unionists in Syria resolved to undertake a significant initiative against the Soviet Union and Saudi Arabia, operating under the conviction that Cairo would assume a more pivotal position in safeguarding their sustained dominance in Syria. Establishing a single cabinet and two executive councils for every province, Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser founded the United Arab Republic in Syria in 1957. But the new UAR government surfaced in March 1958, and instead of political parties, a National Assembly was formed. The Ba'ath Party first maintained friendly ties, but in 1958 Syria's communists objected, and Nasser promised to wage war against them. Declaring a campaign to eradicate the communist movement in Syria, Siraj arrested hundreds of party members and executed others. Nasser gave Siraj, leader of the National Union in Syria, chair of the Syrian Executive Council, and top Syrian in the Union Higher Executive Committee, more authority. President Nasser targeted Syrian writers as saboteurs and opponents of Arabism in 1961 after realizing the disaffection in that country. Rising levies on commodity imports, land expropriations, and a severe drought caused tensions to spin out. Following Nallawi's 1961 coup, Syria's political structure momentarily reverted to pre-1954 form with a civilian prime minister and president. Still, absolute control lay with the unelected group of military leaders known as the Nallawi junta. Though divisive nationalizations were discussed, the People's Party emerged as the leading party. Leading to a split in the junta, military police detained President Qudsi, Prime Minister Dawalibi, and Parliament Speaker Kuzbari, as well as at least 7 MPs in 1962. Raising the UAR flag, a gang of Nasserist and other self-declared free officers broke into Aleppo's ancient citadel in April 2011, murdering the garrison commander. To put down the uprising, the junta responded with air attacks on other targets, including Aleppo's radio station. Politicians were freed from Metzeh and Qudsi was reinstated as president once things settled. Former UAR Health Minister Bashir al-Azma was invited to lead a new government to reverse the policies of his predecessor and relax relations with Cairo. The new government promised to follow a policy of positive neutrality in international affairs, preserve nationalizations and land reform legislation, and aim toward ultimate Arab unification. The new government fell short of expectations too, and Assad and his covert military committee soon hatched a coup scheme for Iraq. With the Baathists organizing their own National Guard militia, the Syrian coup was executed without violence. Aiming at complete union with Egypt, Colonel Jassim Alwan spearheaded a coup effort against Nasserists in 1963. The coup claimed hundreds of lives as well as 27 Nasserist officials' executions. In 1966, Gamal Marawa, the editor of Al-Hayat, was killed by Adnan Shaker Sultani, who spent 18 years trying to gain control in Lebanon and the Arab world. Nasser held power over Lebanon's government leaders, troops, security forces, intelligence agencies, courts, and crime groups. This caused a conflict with President Camille Chamoun, who was known for corruption and being overbearing. This grew more serious in the 1960s, causing the Suez Crisis and increasing unrest in Lebanon. In 1958, Nasser became the president of both Syria and Egypt, leading to a lively discussion about whether Lebanon would stay independent. The battle didn't lead to clear results, and neither side made significant territory gains. The UAR increased its efforts to provide weapons and money, and the coup by the Iraqi free officers proved the serious concerns that Chamoun and Malik had about Nasser. During the Chehab era in Lebanon, there was strong interaction between Lebanese and Egyptian intelligence. This partnership helped grow Lebanon's intelligence system, especially in military intelligence. During the swinging 60s, high society and foreign tourists flocked to Beirut, Lebanon's Marawa villa. Born in 1915, Gamal Marawa was a Shia Muslim underclass lad who started working in journalism during World War II. He became part of the Arab movement and went to West Africa to ask rich Lebanese expatriates for contributions. He was imprisoned and sent to Istanbul, Bulgaria, and Vienna throughout the war. German linguist Franz Marawa was sent by the Gestapo to Berlin in 1942, where he saw Arabist former German ambassador to Iraq and Saudi Arabia, Fritz Grobe. Marawa's perspective was permanently changed by the conflict, as he would fiercely oppose military governments throughout the Arab world. Leading Nasserist warlord Ibrahim Abd al-Qadir Kulaylat oversaw the independent Nasserist movement that burned hotels, including the Holiday Inn, in 1966. Selected specifically to help him on a vital mission to kill Gamal Marawa, a deadly servant of imperialism and agent of the reactionaries, Adnan Sultani was starting on December 5, 1966. The trial of Sultani and Kulaylat was characterized by an explosive device detonating in the Al-Hayat headquarters. With Justice Albert Farhat dissenting against the 4 other justices, the ruling was attacked as a cover-up. Following a six-day conflict in 1967, Israel captured the Palestinian West Bank, Gaza Strip, Syrian Golan Heights, and Sinai Peninsula after defeating Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Nasser's resignation as Egypt's president and his waning power in the Arab world followed from this humiliation. With Palestinian guerrillas executing limited assaults on the Galilee and Beirut witnessing extreme Palestinian factions start attacks, Lebanon became a main theater of Palestinian militancy. With Palestinian guerrillas executing limited assaults on the Galilee and Beirut witnessing extreme Palestinian factions start attacks, Lebanon became a main theater of Palestinian militancy. Israel responded with violent battles between Palestinian terrorists and Lebanese authorities. Lebanon's President Helou sent a team to Cairo in 1969 to meet with Arafat and Egyptian officials speaking for Nasser. Signed by Boustany and Arafat, the Cairo agreement gave Palestinian terrorists rights to strike Israel from Lebanese territory and receive support from the Lebanese army. Internal strife and a possible second civil war resulted from Israeli reprisals on Palestinians and Lebanese equally by 1958 after assaults on Israel. In 1960, the Prime Minister of Jordan, Hazza al-Majali, was killed by a hidden bomb in his office. King Hussein became king when he was just 17 years old on May 2, 1953. During his reign, he modernized the country, joined the United Nations, ended British military presence, married 4 times, and had 11 children. He also survived attempts on his life, coups, and fought in wars against Israelis and Palestinians. The Baghdad Pact argument in 1955 was the background for the first meeting between Jordan and Britain. King Hussein decided to take a balanced approach regarding the agreement, and chose Hazza al-Majali as his new prime minister. In 1956, King Hussein attacked the impact of Englishman George Glubb on Jordan's government. This led him to plan to remove Glubb, which was called Operation Dunlop. This caused Britain, along with France and Israel, to invade Egypt. In Jordan, he renamed the army to the Jordanian Arab Army and organized free elections for parliament. However, the elections were cancelled soon after and people in Jordan started to support Cairo more and moved away from Britain. In 1958, Egypt's King Hussein created the Hashemite Arab Federation to improve his defenses against the United Arab Emirates. But this union did not create Arab unity like Nasser's United Arab Republic did. In July, the Iraqi Free Officers warned of a possible military coup in Jordan, which led to violence in Iraq. King Hussein sent Jordan's troops into Iraq to seek revenge for the House of Hashem and to regain its power through military action. The situation got worse when Hussein's uncle, Sharif Nasser bin Jamil, went 240 kilometers into Iraqi land. In May 1959, King Hussein asked Hazza al-Majali to come back as prime minister for a second time. However, he was killed in a bombing in the city, which caused a lot of anger in Jordan's history. Hazza was born in 1918 and grew up in a Bedouin community in Jordan. He studied law at Damascus University and later returned to Jordan with his wife Samiha and their son Amjad. He worked as a protocol employee at the royal house and improved Amman's roads and water network. In 1954, Majali and his friends created the Patriotic Socialist Party, and Hazza was the first president. In 1960, Jordan's State Security Court convicted 11 men charged with participation in the killing of King Abdallah I in Amman. All were given death sentences, and 2 of the men were connected to Syrian-registered cars used in the incident. The first job of Arab countries is to remove those who support empire, as these cowards allow it to take hold in their nations. The collapse of the UAR in 1961 changed the relationship between Cairo and Amman, but the war in Yemen in 1962 made things more difficult. Nasser and Hussein started making changes in their country, and in 1962, Wasfi al-Tal became the prime minister. However, this period of openness didn't last long. Hussein became anxious when Baghdad and Damascus were taken over by Ba'athist Nasserist coups in 1963. In 1964, Jordan and Egypt renewed their formal ties after a meeting in Cairo. King Hussein of Jordan accepted President Nasser's ideas, which included setting up a united Arab force led by Egypt and establishing a Palestinian national group. Hussein's choice to include Jordan in the war against Israel in 1967 resulted in the loss of East Jerusalem and the West Bank. They came together to protect against extreme groups on both the left and right, including the Palestinian groups they had supported since 1964. Nasser and Hussein agreed to the UN Security Council's Resolution 242, which is still used as the foundation for ideas about a two-state settlement today. In 1967, Yasser Arafat, a Palestinian leader, came to Jordan and turned it into a base for Palestinian strikes on Israel. Hussein took prisoners and then let them go, which led to a crucial conflict and a peace deal. Nasser's sudden shift in how he felt about Hussein in September 1970 was very noticeable. In 1967, Egypt's military attacked Kitaf village in Yemen, marking the first use of chemical weapons in history. The war from 1962 to 1967 was the worst part of Nasser's leadership, resulting in about 20,000 Yemeni deaths and extreme bloodshed. The war started with a military takeover in Sana'a, Yemen in 1962. This led to the creation of a free republic that promised freedom and a socialist future. President Nasser quickly kept up his end of the deal, sending a special forces unit to act as Salal's personal guard and asking Egypt's official acceptance of the Yemen Arab Republic, YR. But a surprising change happened. The imam, whom Salal had killed, actually fled through a back exit. He gathered loyal tribes to fight against the Republicans and the Egyptian invaders. Egypt started its chemical weapons program in the early 1960s, receiving specialized training in Moscow and West Germany. The war continued even after the June 1967 loss, with Egyptian fighter planes still sending flights to gas people in Yemen. The Yemen War in the 1960s increased the problems in President Abdel Nasser's Egypt, causing a shift from Arab nationalism to Arab socialism. Nasser's government tried to make this a government belief, saying that Syrian reactionaries were responsible for the split. In 1961, he announced a socialist revolution in Cairo. This resulted in the arrest of 40 people and the takeover of property owned by 167 reactionary capitalists. The Egyptian economy did not do well under Arab socialism, with industrial output below 3% and farming production increasing by 3%. In the 1960s, Egypt moved toward a more authoritarian government as the state grew larger and a group of powerful military officers gained more control. The closing of Dar al-Ma'arif left writers and artists without places to share their work without government control and suppression. Sayyid Qutb, an Islamist thinker, created a radical belief system that considered all Egyptian officials and citizens to be non-believers, rebels, and enemies of real Islam. The Six-Day War in 1967 caused President Abdel Nasser to quit, which sparked many protests against his government. The protests were not just organized by the Arab Socialist Union, but they weren't completely random either. In June 1967, Nasser said he was resigning because of pressure from Israel, Britain, and the United States. Many Egyptians decided to support Nasser again, so he took back his retirement and became the Prime Minister, President, and Secretary General of the Arab Socialist Union. On September 1, 1969, a military coup in Libya, led by Muammar al-Gaddafi, created the Libyan Republic, which aimed to bring about a new time of freedom and equality. Egypt's President Nasser asked for help from Egypt by sending a team to evaluate the situation. Gaddafi was known for being a cruel leader, involved in foreign attacks, and having connections with powerful people. Egypt played a role in Libya by supporting General Deeb, who helped Gaddafi and his group stay aligned with Cairo. Egypt's war minister Mohammed Fawzi was charged with moving planes, armored units, and motorized troops to the Libyan border. The removal of supporters of the monarchy resulted in the arrest of hundreds of royal family members, leaders, officials, and high-ranking army and police officers. Egypt improved its reputation in Libya by choosing Captain Abd al-Munim al-Huni to lead the new intelligence service. Nasser helped the group by giving tips on how to handle foreign countries and guiding Gaddafi in being a leader and staying in power. Nasser's well-known support made people see Gaddafi as the true boss of the Arab world after Nasser. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the second president of Egypt and an important leader in the Arab world, died on September 28, 1970, when he was 52 years old. He died from a heart attack which was probably made worse by diabetes and years of stress from political and military problems. Nasser recently held an urgent meeting in Cairo to help resolve the issues between Jordan and the Palestine Liberation Organization, also known as the PLO. The meeting finished on September 27th. The next day, Nasser fell down after saying goodbye to important guests at the airport. Despite attempts to save him, he died that evening. His death surprised many in the Arab world because he was seen as a sign of Arab pride and opposition to Western influence. Millions of Egyptians grieved after his death, and his funeral in Cairo on October 1, 1970, was one of the biggest ever, with millions of people and many world leaders attending. Nasser's impact is still debated and divided. He updated Egypt and supported Arab unity, but his rule also faced strict control, economic problems, and military defeats, including the loss in the 1967 Six-Day War. His replacement, Anwar Sadat, later changed Egypt's policies to focus on economic growth and making peace with Israel.